Greetings, everyone. My name is William Porter. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. Today's podcast is another interview session, and we'll be speaking with Mr. Troy Johnson, and he'll be telling us about the work that he has been doing over the past several months and even years. So thank you, Troy, for being here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Before we get started, I'd like to give props to who's sponsoring this program, and that is Every Black Entrepreneurship Podcasting Network. The president of our group, Mr. Jimmy Davies, has done a great job over the past several years. As a matter of fact, we started these podcasts back in June of this year. June the 8th, to be exact about it. And so we're going to go ahead now and finish something that we had talked about when we finished the last segment, and that has to do with the generation of today, especially young people of today, and how we as adults can be of help to young people as they pursue their own greatness, because every individual, in fact, has a greatness within them. Absolutely. And it's up to us to help them bring that out.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I think that is a great segue. Oftentimes when we think of this generation, we use a common word to describe them as millennials. I think sometimes we are unfair to this generation, and the reason I say that is because clearly they don't know what they don't know. I think we hit on that just a little bit as far as the wisdom that was instilled in myself, being arguably the last of a dying breed, being raised by Big Mama. Now Big Mama's 39, and we've got kids raising kids. So I think it's important for us to instill in them a sense of self-worth, a sense of humble confidence, pride, and servitude. You hit on it, and I think it was wonderful. You said that measurement, we call our young men's kings. So these wristbands are used with our young men that have the word king on it, which stands for kind, intelligent, noble, and a go-getter. And we explain to the young people and the young men that just like faith, you've been given a measurement of that, but it's truly up to you to walk in that, to make that choice and that mind up to say that I am a king, that I am worthy. No, I'm not better than anybody else, but I recognize the fact that I'm a better me. And I walk in that, and it's truth. And understanding that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and when God made me, he broke the mold. There is none like me. And I think it's important when we instill that in them, that gives them more of a sense of direction and hope, that they don't get caught up in some of the pitfalls. Because you got to realize, sir, at 12, we didn't have Siri, Alexa, or Google Home. We didn't have something that we could talk into and get information. Well, that's not going to die down anytime soon. If anything, the tools that we have now eventually will be holograms, and we'll no longer have to hold anything. So how do we guide them in that information world to make sure that it's used for good and not evil?
Exactly. You mentioned faith, and that's really what we want to focus on in this particular segment. How did you arrive at the faith that you have now? And it may go back, and I assumed it went back at least until early or late teens. Sure. So how did that come about?
Well, I have to be honest with you, sir. I am in a new chapter of life. I say dipped 3 times, which means baptism. First time was at 9. I was 9, and that unction and that urn caused me to walk down the aisle at Ebenezer Baptist Church in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And at the time, I did it because I knew it was the right thing. But remember, baptism is an outward expression of an inward belief. And my faith in believing in Jesus Christ, that was something that was done as a transformation of being cleansed and made new. Well, the second time was about 26, different chapter of life. A lot has happened from that childhood of 9, 10 years old, now traveling the world and really becoming that prodigal son, going out and no longer being part of junior this and junior that when grandma had me, but really literally traveling the world and going to different edges of the earth and trying this and trying that. And then again, in my early 30s. And that's where really that transition and that next level and next chapter of life began as it pertains to my faith. And really as I became close to leadership in the church. Bishop never allows me to be okay with not being okay. Oftentimes we use that phrase, it is what it is. Well, he wouldn't allow that is what it is spirit. But in loving kindness do I draw thee. So it was never in condemnation. It was never in judgment. But yes, okay, son, that's not it. You know, and he always challenged me. He stretches me. He presses me to get that oil out of that olive, if you may, so that way you can never be complacent in where you're at. I think, like most of us, even in my weight loss journey, we won't talk about this now, but really having to challenge myself to not be okay. My wife plays a huge role in that as well. And I know we're jumping around, but when I was younger in life and running my own sales business, my wife was my administrator. And she spoke into my life at 21, now 39, that one day you'll be a great man of God, you'll be a father, and people will follow you from all walks of life. And I laughed at her, right? Because at 21, I was young, dumb, and full of cum. Nothing spoke to that right there. But here it is now in chapter 39, getting ready to go to a different plateau in age. And Bishop tells us that every 5 years, a man reaches another chapter and different level of life and understanding. And I'm just thankful for where I'm at. I said with the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains, but it came through experience. Life's greatest teacher will always be just that, life. Grandma said, what? Keep living. And the more you experience, the more you reflect, the more opportunity it gives you to grow, both spiritually and physically.
Well, I know that faith has been important as far as your business is concerned. And could you tell us some maybe specifics about how that has worked with you as far as your nonprofit is concerned? And it may be as it relates to your instruction of the young people that you have, teaching them about what they should do to increase themselves and to enhance themselves as far as making sure that greatness comes out of them, as I mentioned before. So how does your faith connect with your business, what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So great question. Once a month, we always have word empowerment and big on practical teachings. You know, I never want to talk over them, nor do I want to belittle them, but I want to make sure that we can take scripture for what it is and in its contents and give them a little bit of the story, but then make it plausible to them and reaching them right there where they're at. I'm very careful when it comes to the word itself. Why? Because we're not here to proselytize or convert anyone. We accept anybody. So as far as the approach from a faith perspective in our organization, I stick with Galatians 5. When Paul was speaking to the believers of Galatia, he spoke of the content of God's character, which is the fruit of the Spirit. That's 9 positive character traits that I believe that regardless of what you believe in, if you can embody those, if you can accept those for what they are as positive characteristics of a person, ultimately helps you bud and become better, and anyone that's around you can feel that light. And I believe there's no coincidence that the first one is love. With love and kindness have I drawn thee. I always say, and this is my quote, I'm going to take this one. Love is glue that binds us together. Without it, it's no wonder why we're so divisive. It's no wonder why there's so much division in the world, because we don't lead with love. We lead with isms, bias, and phobias, and we allow assumptions to dictate our actions.
Well, we're going to go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we're going to finish the program, but I do want to ask you about another element of your faith, something that I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years, and that is as an author, writing novels and books about the experiences people have that are unusual, extraordinary, and sometimes even miraculous, and ask you about that. How many experiences you've had that you might classify as unusual?
Sure.
Or even miraculous.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to that when we come back. So stay with us. Welcome back. We have Troy Johnson with us today, and he's talking about his nonprofit. And we've gained so much information as it relates to how all of us can contribute to helping our young people in our community to better themselves. But right now we're talking with Troy about his faith, and that's what I want to continue with at this point. And as I mentioned, I write about experiences people have that are unusual and sometimes even miraculous. And I'd like to ask you, can you identify maybe 2 or 3 or experiences that you've had that you might view now as very unusual, that were definitely influenced by God or divinely influenced? So do you have 2 or 3 that you can
Absolutely.
identify?
First, great question.
Tell us about that.
Thank you, man. William, God speaks all the time. We just don't listen. My first car, I'm going to go back on this one. We're going to go back to high school on this one. I believe I was 16, maybe 17 years old. I used to weigh 475 pounds. We're not going to get into that one in this segment. However, my first car was a 1987 Honda Excel. It was a stick shift. And remember, I grew up in Atlanta. I went to high school in the greater Atlanta area. And I remember coming into, there's 2 highways in Atlanta, 75 and 85, and they merge as they come into the city. And I remember coming down 75, I'm in 5th gear, very impatient, remember, stubborn Taurus, right? I want what I want when I want it. And I wanted to get on up the road, and the people were in my way as far as I was concerned. Well, there's a median lane that's not really a lane of its own, but if you're in that much of a rush, you can go across it and go ahead and get into the highway traffic. Well, I thought that I was going to do that. So I'm in 5th gear. And in that median lane, because I'm looking at the traffic that's coming into 85, was a police car that had pulled someone over. Now I'm in 5th gear, and I'm probably maybe 50 yards from this police car in 5th gear. As a novice driver, just getting my driver's license, the only thing I knew to do was to drop it in neutral, turn the wheel, and when I did that, the car spun erratically twice. Now, mind you, when I look to my left, traffic is flowing. Well, the car spun around twice and when it stopped, it was facing oncoming traffic. But the traffic that I saw prior to that happening, it's almost as if it vanished. And it just came around the car like the car had a force field in it. Well, even though it was in the middle of rush hour traffic, I was able to reverse the car, pull it over to the side. I was hyperventilating. And if I could be very honest with you, I urinated on myself. I did. I pissed my pants. I did. The same officer that was in the median that I was in such a rush to get to walked up to the car, and he just said one thing. He said, "Son, did you learn your lesson?" And he walked away. Not 30 seconds later, I looked in my rearview mirror and that cop car was gone, as if it was never there in the first place. Now, at the moment, I was so shaken, I was so disturbed, it didn't hit me right then. Right then, it was just, whoa, I got my life. I'm gonna go back to the house. I'm only 17 years old. But as I sit back and I reflect and I'm in a new chapter of life, I know that that was divine. But again, God speaks, we just don't listen. That was at 17.
He speaks also of being in the presence of angels unaware.
And you never know.
And
right?
Sometimes even in the form of a policeman or a patrolman.
That's right. He used a donkey, sir.
Exactly.
So he could use anybody.
Exactly. But
now
that's
we
just
fast
one.
forward.
Yeah, go ahead.
We fast forward now into more recent endeavors as the armor bearer to a bishop of a deliverance ministry, and really not knowing what that entails. He explained to me that you are the first in line for the attacks of the enemy because you serve as a protector to me. This is Bishop speaking to me. And not really understanding, so I guess it was Kevin Hart said, "You're going to learn today." So one of the things that happened to me in the home that me and my family live in, I'll never forget, it was February of last year. Gets kind of cold in North Carolina in the morning times in February. And in that, we woke up to smoke filling the house. The house was filled with smoke. Now, if I could just digress just for a moment, a week prior to this happening, the CO2 alarm in the home kept going off. And me being the stubborn tourist that I am, instead of replacing it and seeing what I can do to fix it, I took it off the wall, took the battery out, and put it into the drawer. A week later, house filled with smoke. Woke us up at 2 a.m. We had to vacate the premises, raise all the windows, and open up every door in the house so that the smoke can dissipate. So we're standing outside shaking because it's cold. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark outside. Smoke dissipates. I said, man, we'll take care of this in the morning. I mean, it's too early for this. So we attempt to go back to sleep, and the next morning, the heat and AC man comes out. He goes to the AC outside, and he knocks on my door. He says, Mr. Johnson, can you come out here? Let me show you something. So he begins to show me that 8 different small holes in the, I believe, condenser. He said, do you know what that means? All of them were rusted. All of these holes were rusted, which means that it had been that way for a while. It just didn't just happen, or it wouldn't have been rusted. He said, I said, no, sir, what do you mean? He said, there's CO2 leaking into the house. He said, what happened yesterday was the cherry on top of what has been happening over time. Not a week or 2 weeks prior to that happening, sir, I saw an obituary where CO2 killed the whole family. It was a father that was a single father to 7 kids. And that same CO2 got into that house and killed everybody, dad and children. Well, that took me back. It really did. I had to call my wife. I was in tears because I had to explain to her what was happening. So needless to say that they had to replace that whole unit because the whole unit was destroyed. See, the CO2 sensor was trying to tell me something. Again, God speaks. We just don't listen.
Right, exactly.
And last but not least, and there's many, but I'll stick to this one. In my weight loss endeavors at 475 pounds, I had never suffered with low blood sugar. Diabetes, borderline, high blood pressure, cholesterol, took that medication. But in my weight loss, I now had never had any of those episodes, and a lot of the medication that I was taking, I was now off of. But I'll never forget, we were at a church event at a local park. And I still have an inner fat boy, sir, so I still love sweets, pound cake, Rice Krispie treats, ice cream, all. Still a joy to my heart. Well, I remember at the park eating all of those things and very overindulgent. Well, I got home and my wife graduated from Winston-Salem State with a nursing degree. All divine. And God knew that you need a nurse in your life. So with that being said, and this is me recalling the story through her because in this story I'm about to tell, I was out of it. She said I started going around the house reaching for the wall as if I was blind. And she said that if you don't, and she kept calling my name, she said, if you don't respond to me in the next couple of minutes, I'm calling for the ambulance. Well, not 30 seconds later after she said that, I ended up in the bathroom and I collapsed. My chin hit the side of hit the sink and put a split in it. Obviously you can't see it now because I have a beard, but I have a scar right there. I went into a seizure. My blood sugar dropped to 27. Normal is 70. So I was on borderline getting ready to go into convulsions for a diabetic coma. Well, my head was in between the toilet and the tub, like a ping pong ball. And my wife said that she was reaching for me to try to pull me out of that situation. I'm 220 pounds of dead weight. She said that I was coherent enough, don't remember this clearly, I was shaking like a fish. Said I was coherent enough to ball my fist up and start punching at her. She said that eventually she was able to grab me and pull me away. Still had to go through the seizure, but without my head bouncing back and forth. All I remember is I woke up and there was 5 EMTs in my living room. I was soaking wet. Body was full of sweat. All my clothes were sweated out. And they said, go get him a cup of orange juice and make him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich now. I was able to get into the back of the bus, into the ambulance, and they shot this glucose type material into my mouth to help raise my blood sugar. It was freak. I had never dealt with that ever again in life. But I believe, again, God speaks. We just don't listen.
That's right. That's an amazing story. Well, listen, Troy, we're about out of time, and it's been great having you here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And but before we leave, is there anything else that you want to mention that you may not have gotten to today that would be beneficial to our audience? And you can do that briefly, because we're going to go ahead and finish things up.
I would like to admonish and encourage the viewers to support our nonprofit. We are a registered nonprofit organization, and we always say, one, we could do more with more, and a movement is only as good as the people that support it. Without the support, it's just a dream, and King had enough of those. It's time for action. So please visit us at www.ym4c.org. Again, www.ym4c.org. And not if, but when the Lord leads you, hit the donate button. Help us to continue to encourage our young men and to inspire them, as well as expand our programming as we go into our 2020 vision of our YMU University, which stands for Young Mogul University, which will give our young people the opportunity to be exposed to entrepreneurial endeavors, budgeting 101, marketing, social media presence, elevator pitch, as well as the importance of business acumen, as well as our STEAM 2.0, which will now give them exposure into technology, IT, as well as robotics, music, and the arts such as ballet and dance. And then last but not least, our financial literacy program, which helps bridge the gap between families and learning how, and that program is called All About the Benjamins, which will now bring the families together and learning how to use credit and money as a tool so we can get out of that rat race.
Well, that's certainly great. Again, we'd like to thank you for being here today. And with the experience of your weight situation, I think that's actually a separate program that we probably could talk for another hour about.
Or more, right?
So we look forward to having you back
I appreciate it.
at some point in the future to talk about that.
Yes, sir.
So we'd like to thank our audience as well. And also, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Black Entrepreneurship. And this is a podcasting network that was started last June, and we're very interested in new people coming on board. So contact the person that you see on your screen if you're interested. And one last thing, if you're going through something bad or if you're going through something good, just keep in mind that there's always more good things coming your way. We'll see you the next time.